Hello there, today I'm talking about Reptiles, a game in which you collect scales to save these little cold-blooded critters. I'm going to give a gameplay overview as well as my thoughts on the game, and then dive into what happened to this publisher. Alright, so here we have the game set up for 2 players. Each player receives a starting reptile card. There's a few more to choose from if you're playing a 3 or 4 player game. And the goal of the game is to have the most points at the end. The end game is triggered when there are only 3 conservation mastery tiles left. After that, everyone gets one final turn, including the player that triggered the end game. And then you'll total up the points on your cards and your tiles and see who has the most. Now, how does the gameplay work? Well, we start off with one tile, or rather scale, on each space. And at the beginning of each turn, you'll go into this very nice shimmery bag, and you will take 4 and just put them without looking onto each space. And then you will take an action. The actions are designated on the spaces. So on spot number 1, you get 1 food per tile, for color tile, and you also take 1 color. 1 color means you just take all of the scales of that color from that space. So I could take this, and I would get 2 food. Over here, you draw 1 card, so that means you can take a new reptile to work on in front of you. You can only have 2 cards in front of you at a time, so it kind of limits what you can work on. And then you also get to take 2 colors from here, in which case this is only 1 color, so I would just take all of those and a card. Or over here, I could take 3 colors from this space. Taking 3 colors, putting them there. And over here, I could save 1 card, and I could take 2 colors. So saving a card is when you have it completely filled out. So when you take tiles, let's say I took these over here, I must be able to put them onto a card immediately. So in this case, these clear spots are wild, so I can put any color there, doesn't matter. These spots have to be red. So let's say that I had this all filled out. At that point, I could then choose the save action, in which case all of these are discarded, and this is now put into my score pile. Each card also gives you an ability when it is saved. So these points and the abilities only count after you've saved a card. Anything that you have not saved or haven't finished by the end of the game will not score you any points. So that is how you save cards. The white scales are also wild, so these can go on any space, so they could go on the orange or the wild, but you don't have to put a wild on a wild, you can just put any color there. So it's an interesting dynamic because you have to gauge which tiles are going to be useful for you and make sure that you're not ending up wasting a lot of actions because any tiles that you cannot immediately place have to go into the middle, and then they will just sit there until they are mixed back in when this bag runs out. The last little twist, which is actually a pretty important one, are the food tokens. So the food tokens you can collect if you choose the feed action, and these can be discarded to take tiles from the discard, to save a reptile or draw a card, save 2 reptiles and draw 2 cards. So you can discard 2, 3, or 4 food to take additional bonus actions, and you can do that as long as you have food to do so. So that is, I think, where a bit of the strategy comes in, because you are able to kind of chain together multiple actions and score more cards. These tokens are used for some cards that are wild, so some of the cards will let you designate what type of reptile it is, and that could help you gain some of these mastery tiles, which typically involve getting different combinations of certain reptiles or certain biomes, things like that. So that's a brief overview of the gameplay, not a full how to play, mind you, but let's talk about the components. So the components are extremely well done. I really like these tiles and just the way they interlock like that in the scale pattern. It's very satisfying, and they have a good weight to them. This bag I already mentioned is very nice and shiny, has a good scaly texture to it. This little ring, you'll notice, has a spot where you can slide it out, and that just makes it easier to slide these tokens out when you need to refill the bag. If I had to have a gripe about something, it would be that some of the artwork is repeated. The scales needed are different, but the artwork is repeated. However, I can't really blame the artist for that. I'm sure that they were commissioned for a certain number of pieces, so I'm sure that was just a budget decision there, just to have the cards repeat a little bit. I can't really blame anyone for that, since it was most likely not a decision they had any say over. It was just for budget reasons. But overall, really well done production. These tokens are a bit small, but they work for what you need them. And overall, just really nice and pleasant game. Now, I don't typically do traditional board game reviews on this channel. I'll do retrospective series like Pre-Owned and series where I take a look at 5 first impressions because I feel like that fits a smaller niche, whereas other larger channels tend to review games before I even have a chance to play them, and so it doesn't really feel like there's much room for me to say anything else. However, with Reptiles, I'm in the unique situation where no one else has made a video review of this game, which is surprising. I found one text review online, but for the most part, the response to this game seems to have just been crickets. Now, I'm going to dive into the mystery of why that is in a moment, but I will give a brief overall impression, which is that it's good. I enjoyed it. This is the kind of game that I wish people would buy and introduce people to board games with. I'm pretty sure I saw it at big box stores. And so having this sit next to a bunch of other bog standard copy-paste versions of some other pop culture game, this stands out. And it looks nice. The components are great. I think it's a good game. But why was it ignored? What happened to this publisher, and why did they disappear? Let's get to the bottom of it, but that's going to be hard to do because there's hardly any info on this. And so the mystery is kind of just, why is there no info? So, to start, I have a couple reasons why I think this game may have been ignored. And the first is that it comes from a legacy toy company. So legacy toy companies are what I use to refer to the game companies that have been making games for decades. So companies like Mattel and Hasbro. In this case, we have Jakks Pacific. This was released under their Jakks Wild Games line from a few years ago. So legacy toy companies are in an interesting situation because I feel like a lot of people in the hobby tend to look down upon them because they just copy and paste Monopoly, they just copy and paste Uno, and they're frowned upon for that. But how is that any different, might I ask, than Asmodee pushing out yet another rebranding of Catan? Like the Energy Empire one or whatever they just came out with? Was that really necessary? And yet, that new version of Catan will get several reviews online, while something original will be ignored because it's from a legacy toy company. And I find that problematic. As someone who really appreciates the hobby, I want people to be exposed to different types of games. And yet, often when a game like this comes out, the response is, well, it's good, but it's not as good as insert hobby game here. For example, something someone might say about this game is that, well, it's good, but it's not as good as Azul. And I think that's problematic because often in the hobby, we think that games are simpler than they are. So we'll say, oh, it's an easy game. Like, if you've played this, you'll understand it. But that's not always true. And this game is actually relatively simple. So it's less complex than Azul. It has a niche and a space that it can be without having to be compared to other more traditional hobby games. And yet, no one's talking about it. And why is that? Well, I think this publisher just ran out of budget, it seems like. There's not much information. I can only speculate unless someone who was involved in the project wants to shed some light on the situation. But hello there, Editor Aaron. I just wanted to say that I did receive a response from one of the individuals attached to this project. However, due to an NDA, they were understandably not able to offer any insight as to the fate of Jack's Wild Games. That means we're going to have to go back to wild speculation. One example of why I think this is that if you scan this code, it's supposed to take you to a how to play video. But when you scan it, all it does is take you to the Jack specific website where you can look at the 4 games in this line. So it seems like they didn't even put together the how to play videos. The thought was there, it just didn't come to fruition. Another reason that I think this line just collapsed is because if you look on Board Game Geek, there's 6 games listed under Jack's Wild Games, and 2 of those seem to have never actually been released. One of them actually looks pretty cool. It's called Botcadia. I would play that. It looks interesting. You're drafting tiles and building robots, but only 3 people own it, and I'm pretty sure those are the playtesters, because I can't find any information or any copies of it for sale online. So did they not publish it? Did they just scrap the whole line and discard them so they could take a tax write-off? Like, what happened here? But Reptiles is one of the games that did get released. There's an OK Corral game and 2 others that seem interesting. But it seems that this line just ran out of budget. One of the names that is consistently attached to these is Caroline Klimek. That name is attached to a majority of these games here. And that designer has designed one game recently, but it's under a different publisher. So my guess would be they are no longer with Jack Specific. But I'm curious as to what happened here. Because it saddens me when a legacy game company tries to make something new and innovative, and it's just dead on arrival, right? So did they just run out of budget? Or did the project just get scrapped by some exec who was like, this isn't going anywhere, just send it all to the shredder? I really am curious to know what happened here, because there's a lot of passion put into this. And it's sad to me that people aren't getting to appreciate this work. A similar situation has happened with other companies, right? Mattel tried to get into games a few years ago. This is Wizards Wanted. It's an excellent economic game with kind of a very interesting mechanism where your movement costs you money, but you also need the currency to complete tasks. It's fascinating. There's also Life in Ruterra. This was from Hasbro under their Avalon Hill brand. It was an attempt, again, to be a more hobby-style game, but in a big box store setting. And all of these projects seem to have fizzled out after a few years, right? This designer has gone on to just create different versions of Uno. And again, I'm not trying to harp on the designers. I know it's not their fault. They are working for a company. But it seems like at least some of them want to have more interesting games, right? So when someone in these companies approaches their executive, whoever's in charge, and says, hey, like, what if we tried doing something like this? And they get the green light and they're excited to take off running and develop something that they feel passionate about, that isn't just another carbon copy of a licensed IP game, I'm sure that feels great. But then what happens more often than not, it seems, is that they're met with lukewarm responses. The board game community rejects them because, well, it's good, but not as good as this. And it ends up just warming the shelf as opposed to being something that people play. And I feel particularly attached to this story because when I was young, it would have been my dream to work for Hasbro or Mattel. When I was sitting there making roll and move games about the Hardy Boy books, I would have loved to be doing that for a big company. Now, as an adult, I realize that if you work for one of those companies, your creativity can only go so far as what the people calling the shots have decided. And so to see people take a chance, and at some point someone agreed to produce this and was on board, and then just either the funding or the effort, something at some point waned, and things got scrapped, and I will never get to play Botcadia. I want to play Botcadia. Okay? So what can be done about this, right? Well, as a small producer, right, I can't really do much. My voice only goes so far. But I think that larger review channels really need to consider reviewing more games like this, right? And maybe they do try, but reviewing games like this, but from the perspective of this could be someone's first introduction into a more hobby game. And it's okay that it's not as complex. It's okay that it's not as strategic as some of the games that you might enjoy. But receiving this as a gift would be so much better than just another version of something that has been around for decades, whether that be Monopoly or Catan. I want to support original content, and this is original, right? Just like with movies, just like with video games, there are plenty of remakes and sequels that are good, but when something is original, it just feels a lot more lively, and that's really what I want out of this. So if anyone out there from this publisher is listening, thank you for giving this a shot. I'm sorry it didn't seem like it worked out, but I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time on Board Games, Bricks, and Hobbies. Take care.